Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to all of you who are joining us today. This is the third webinar in a series of programs about cybersecurity. We are so pleased to be collaborating with our international partners, Canary serving Canada, Red Clara serving Latin America, and LAC4 specifically serving the Caribbean. Live translation is being provided today in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we thank our Red Clara partners for assisting us in finding this talented team of translators. If you click the globe icon at the bottom of the webinar window, you'll see your selection of languages and you can choose the one of your choice. And again, we have a talented team of translators today who will translate our English presentations here into those 4 languages. Please add any comments to the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from. And note that we will have time for question and answers at the end of our presentation today. And if you could add your questions into the Q&A feature in the webinar, that's a great way to use the technology that we have today. This is a fireside chat, so we encourage your questions and look forward to having you participate in the discussion. With the logistics taken care of, I am so pleased to introduce Dameion Brown. Dameion Brown has over 24 years of experience in the public sector, both military and academic, and in the private sector. He is currently the Director of Information Security, and he's the Chief Information Security Officer at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. He has served in the United States military and is a retired Army officer. Dameion has taught at the college level and in the military on cybersecurity, intelligence, ethical hacking, and forensic security. He has a bachelor's from Mississippi State University, a master's of military science, and a master of business administration degree, along with many other certifications. Now I am very pleased to welcome and turn our webinar over to Dameion. Welcome, Dameion.
Thank you, Anne. So it is a honor and a high privilege to be here today with you. And I wanted to uh, just be overwhelmed and share the overwhelming feeling. I was telling everybody in our prep that my dad, who earlier passed away in May, he would be tickled to death to see me, and he wouldn't care what I was talking about, but to talk to people in 3 different languages is just remarkable. And you should be applauded for being able to just show up and be able to push the professional development envelope just a little bit further to get information. So I'm honored to share whatever I know and whatever I have with you. And so, and I thank Internet too, and I thank everybody that made this possible. So what we're going to do is I'm not going to talk too long because I do want you to get your questions in, and I want you to have some discussion points ready. So I'll definitely give just a brief history of how I got to the point where I am, because that's always important. I want to just talk about some basic things with identity. And then I just want to give you some of my outlook based on the statistics that I came up with when we were preparing for this discussion and preparing for this engagement. So I think one thing to note, and I won't spend too much time, but I'll spend a couple of minutes on here because people tend to marvel at how I actually got to this point. And it's something that, when I talk to whether it's soldiers, whether it's students, whether it's professional learners who want to change careers. One thing to note is that cybersecurity is not just a computer science or a information technology discipline. It is a discipline and a niche that transcends all verticals. If you were in the United States has 16 to 17 critical infrastructure sectors, and each sector needs cybersecurity. So, what that means to you is that the job that you're in or the job that you aspire to have in this niche, the marketplace needs you. There's employers that need your subject matter expertise, and they need the growing subject matter expertise that you have. So I want to applaud you guys again for coming out and listening to this. The other thing that I would like to give is to just be ready. The one thing that I inherited from my mom is what you call her kinetic energy. So I just work. Uh, and I just wanted to encourage you all that no matter what you're doing, nothing beats hard work. Hard work shows, hard work is what's going to get you in front. And the hard work that I had and I gave was noticed by my VP. She signed on and she asked me to come and she asked me to lead this institution through business by way of cybersecurity and AI governance as well. Right. So these are some of the things to look at. Uh, I don't do this alone. And that's another thing, right? Uh, you know, some people may think I'm just the smartest thing in the room. I'm not, right? They got a saying when I'm growing up, the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not that. What I am is I'm intelligent enough to pick up on patterns, pick up on statistics, and then have a group of people that help me. Very well, Internet 2, the MSCC that I'm a part of, and everybody that you see on the screen. And so, what I've done is I've learned over my career to take this information that people give and produce what you have on these slides. So, let's talk about a couple of things here that when I was preparing, that I already knew, and it seems not to go away. You would say, Damien, out of everything that you either pay attention to or that you want to center around, what would that be? And that would be what we call in the industry the single source of truth. And that means identity. You cannot log into anything. You cannot access anything. You cannot do anything without a profile or a service account. And so, for some reason, over the transformation of our digital culture worldwide, we seem to focus on devices and hardware more than we focus on identity. And so you can say, well, Damien, the ratio for one user to devices is 1 to 10. And Damien would tell you that Damien does not care about the 10 devices. He cares about the one person that owns the 10 devices. So if you are a identity access management professional, if you are a cybersecurity professional, I would encourage you to maybe work your strategy to center around the single source of truth. Now, CrowdStrike, a security company, you may know of them, they had a statistic, and the statistic was alarming to me. It said that 81% of the intrusions, at least this year, have been accredited not to malware, right? And we all know what malware is. You click on something, there's a remote protocol to it, and it goes back to somewhere where somebody's collecting whatever they want to. They said that 81% of people are not even given malware. What they are doing is they are literally logging in, and that is alarming. And so in security, nothing is 100%. But what we do know is that if we can put a chokehold on entry to our environment, then we would be able to see the rest. And so that's where multi-factor and dual factor authentication comes into play, and the various forms and the various strategies of multi-factor and dual factor authentication. Now, I preface this, be prepared. I have not yet been told wrong or shown wrong. Everybody is not going to try to accept, no matter where you are, worldwide, multi-factor and dual factor authentication. And there's a very interesting thing. The interesting thing is that I'll have people who befriend me, I'll have colleagues who come to me, and believe it or not, they will ask me to cut off that multi-factor and dual factor authentication, and I can't do it because that is a one way that we can help protect our environment, whatever you do. And so those are some things to look at. Another thing and another reason why we do this is something called dwell time. And these slides and the recording will be available. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I will say this. No matter how well your defenses are in your environment, 9 times out of 10, there may be one of your users through operating system update, through different things that are on their device, that they or either someone using their profile will be in your environment, and they will wait for the right time to do what they have come to do. And so dwell time is another reason why identity access management, knowing who your users are, knowing the behavior of your users, will serve you well in preparing a good security posture for your network. What does some of those things look like? Well, at the end of the day, we can buy a lot of tools and we can buy a lot of technology. But at the end of the day, one of the best ways to work a good posture in identity is the educated user. And I have not seen anything else beat an educated user. If you see the graphic that I show you here, you see that down below there's a concept. The concept is called defense in depth. Very ironic. Out of all the tools that we have, do you see what's on the outer perimeter of that graphic? The outer perimeter of that graphic, it says policy, procedure, and awareness. These are some of the cornerstones of the identity access management solution and your security posture and how you do security operations in your network. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you. Almost done here. As we can see, not only do we take a step further with the policy, the procedure, and the awareness, but when I was talking to a kindergarten through 12 class last week, I was telling them that this chart, this table that you see here, are some basic ways that you can stop 99.9% of everybody that tries to break in. And if you don't remember anything else from this, one of the things that I want you to remember is that basic blocking, basic additions, basic things to your network through policy and governance will work just as well. I have what we call vendors, security companies. They talk to me all the time and they try to sell, certain products, certain services, certain strategies. But one thing is true is that no matter what your budget is, the marketplace will accept you. There is a solution and there is a way that you can do these things and that you can protect your environment. So I promised you that this wouldn't be long, but those are just some basic core concepts that when we're presenting something on zero trust and when we're presenting on the concept of least privilege, that I want you to be aware of. And now, my good friend, Mr. Nick, is going to talk to us and take us through another part of this discussion where we can sit and we can probably delve a little bit deeper into where we are and what we want to do as we talk about zero trust.
Thanks, Damien. You're right on. It's so good, so interesting to hear you talk about sort of frame this. And one of the things you mentioned when you're talking was the user education, but then also sometimes there's resistance around multi-factor authentication. And with identity being the new perimeter of like many campuses, like those two things, like sometimes it's harder for users to do MFA. Well, how do you make it easier for them? How do you help them? How do we protect them? And how do we get them to buy in that it's really in their best interest to protect themselves by using MFA, which then protects your campus? Like, how does that discussion go when you talk to them about? Because like you have to help them understand.
So when I was operating in oil and gas, definitely in the military, in oil and gas, my old boss, he said, Damien, we're businessmen who operate in security and not the other way around. One of the things that I would caution people to do is two things. Know your business. What business are you in? We know the business, and we know the business is not only is it a university, but we know it's a institute of research. So when I understand that kind of stuff, I begin to take a step back and begin to say, from a student, from a staff, and from a faculty standpoint, what does their user experience look like? Because 9 times out of 10, the user experience makes them resistant to want to adopt what you're asking them to do. Now, you're always going to have 10% that just are not going to want to adopt at all. But I've come to find that the other portion that don't want to adopt is because their user experience is horrible. And so now we start to go to some customer service things, right? Because contrary to popular belief, me as a security professional, I'm not supposed to be in the business of saying no. What I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to secure and sure up your ability to use technology. I'm supposed to be an enabler of that. So these are some of the concepts of how we try to get people to adopt and people to come to what we want from a security standpoint.
That's great. And like
Yeah.
having them trying to do that engagement to get them to come to you so they know that you're going to enable them to get their job done and meet the business goals. And saying business when you're talking in higher education is sometimes, I mean, if you're talking about the business school, that's okay. But talking about business is sometimes doesn't resonate with IT people. But that's why we're there. Like if you're not running if you're not doing research, teaching classes, like your organization is really challenged, and you have to enable your campus to get their work done. And how have you, like when uh, let's say somebody has some unique security requirements and you want to enable them to get their, like a researcher, and you want to help them get their job done. How do you go about having that discussion of trying to understand their requirements and then help them figure out a solution?
Sure. One, two researchers come to mind. Well, actually three. You know, one researcher, just because of their relationship with IT. So we're talking about relationship building. Felt great to come and to ask for assistance in their work with one of our government agencies. So that's one way. And when they come, obviously they're going to be forthcoming and they're going to want to share their workflow and want to share how their business and how their research is going to be conducted. Another researcher I'm thinking about, no, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they showed up when I was talking to another director, a director of computing and communication, and she expressed concern. In one instance, she was happy because she was at another institution that wasn't as supportive as we were. That's good, right? At the same time, she said, on Saturdays when I get up and I get ready to remote in, I'm having problems and I'm having to open up multiple screens. And if I'm not careful, my data and my research will be lost and I have to start all the way back over. And so understanding that workflow and assuring her that we will continue to come over, and all of us will come to her office and see what she's doing and look and see how she's working. These things are just some of those ways that you can better understand, all of those aspects. So those are just, two people off the top of my head that I thought about when you asked me that. So, yeah.
That's great. And it's like you're just tying to enabling them to get things done and drive your institution forward. Sometimes when there's unique security requirements, like and in Common, Internet 2 has this federation, Common Federation, where we've been working with the National Institute of Health on identity assurance and how do you pass that identity assurance information from your local campus to the
Mm,
NIH and research organizations. And that's helping enable those individual researchers. When you've got that researcher and they're trying to collaborate with their peers, like sometimes there's challenges around knowing who the people that you're working with at the other side,
mm,
and you have to enable the researcher to be able to like securely share their research. And
mhm.
have you ever had to work with a researcher to try to help them share their research?
Yes, yes, you do. And I tell you, the reason why I'm probably, and I'm not just trying to tout this because I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I put my hands on things, and that's how I learn. And fortunate for me, all of my 24 years in my professional career have been service oriented. So there's a service component, and then there's a hands-on component, public sector, military, and then private. I understand. And so when I understand these things, I know that there is again, we keep going back to customer service. There's a customer service component and a consultant component to what we do. And as a consultant, now you you have some good ones and then you've got some not so good ones. The good consultant will walk the client from start to finish and everything in between to enable their job to be done. And so throughout my career, the best consultants make me look good, right? And that's the concept that you want to take on when you're dealing with that research. You want that researcher to look good. There's research in other universities that they're collaborating with. There's research with government entities in the US. There's international research that's happening, believe it or not. And so you want that researcher standing tall and looking good when they need to collaborate. And so that's how you're able to accomplish that, with those specific researchers.
Thanks, Damien. You and I could probably talk all day about this. We definitely want to hear some questions
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
audience. And so
we do.
there's the QA pod that where you can ask questions. We'll keep talking for a minute, and while
Sure.
everyone's starting to think of questions to put in the QA panel. Um, so I'm thinking about more about enabling researchers within at Internet Tube. We're working on some training around secure research enclaves to help
Okay.
set up those enclaves for researchers
Yeah,
to help enable them to do their research, because sometimes the requirements are very stringent, and that
yeah,
you may want to just have that focused in that one specific area, because you can't make your whole campus NIST 800 171, something
that's
like
right.
that. So
That's
have
right.
you ever worked with a researcher to say, here's a place where you can go put your research, and to set that up?
Yeah, so that's a good question and good point. So in one instance with the researchers, it's really a collaborative effort. There's been some things here recently that we're doing at the school that fortunate enough is able to break down some silos that were there, whether they, wanted to be or not. Some silos where you start to have collaboration with research and development a little bit better. When you do that, you're able to open that up, and then everybody is able to agree. So when you sit down with a grant or a scope of work or an opportunity to work with a government agency, everybody's on the same page. So that makes understanding the enclave that's needed a little bit more quicker and a little bit better when your VP of R&D understands and when the researcher understands. Now here's another thing. In our prep, I saw something about what are some points for the larger community. Fortunate enough, again, uh, in the states here in the US, in Mississippi, we would be considered one of the big four in the state. And so the other three that are a little larger than us, we've all come together. So there's practitioners that are a part of those other universities like me that are either regulatory in nature or VPs of other, entities within those higher education schools. And they said, let's share our resources. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out a streamlined way that we can meet all of these requirements. Maybe someone can come to our enclave. Maybe we can come to yours. And so those are some of the ways that I've seen us, try to address some of those. So
And that's great to hear, because like from the Internet 2 perspective, we want our members and the community working together like that, and for us to help provide some of that shared infrastructure, so that it can be as hopefully easier to help your users and enable them to get their job done and get the
yeah,
research done. So I'm just encouraging everyone to put a question in the QA pod, in case so that we can have your talk to the things that are most pressing to you and your campus. So any questions yet? And here's one. Then there's a question that just came in, asking
yeah,
about um, what role do you see HBCUs in playing in shaping the national cybersecurity policy or workforce pipeline?
That's very interesting. I'll tell you. So with me being having the MBA, when I was sitting at the University of Texas, I learned something, and that is you have head-to-head competition. We know that in business, right? But then
And
there's
football.
another, yeah, in football, right? And football, right? And and I'm not gonna roll because you struck a nerve with me with the whole football thing. I would like to talk about that, but I'm not. What I am going to talk about is competitive advantage in business, right? There's some deans that I had to talk to that asked the same thing, and I said, well, instead of focusing on this school, that school, whatever, why don't you have a competitive advantage where you do what you do, but you're the one that does it effectively and efficient? And I've always said it, and I'll say it again. You may have one institution that may crank out 40 to 50 people who are ready for the workplace. However, if you're an institution that does what needs to be done and you're able to produce 10 to 20, well, you've won just as well. And so, and we see that, and we see that. I've seen it. Me being here since 2022, it amazes me to see young learners from our institution go to Microsoft, go to Amazon, go to these different government contracting organizations and firms. So the competitive advantage has always been there because of, and is there better than it was earlier, in my opinion, because of the digital transformation and the access to that digital transformation and the knowledge. The information is ubiquitous. I tell students because I teach in 3 different places, and I tell students, I said, back in 2002 and 2005, if the metadata that is in Google now was there then, and I had access to Grammarly, right, that helps you write and it helps you do things, I said I would run that university. I really would. And so, those are some of the opportunities I see for HBCUs and collaborative, opportunities. One more thing before we get to some other questions. We're a part of, a UARC with a couple of universities, and for the first time, a couple of us are going to sit down with the Air Force labs, the United States Air Force labs, collaborating because they said they want to give us some projects so that we can further our research in artificial intelligence. And so there's these opportunities. So that's where I see the HBCUs, being able to put a good foot forward, so.
Excellent. Thanks, Damien. So we just got a question in about collaborations. And so,
Yes.
hi, Michael Mays. It's great to see you on the again. He's got a question. What is the best way to start a collaboration with your HPC team, HPC high performance computing team if
Mm,
your identity and access management, security, and HPC teams have been previously siloed off in
mm,
their solutions? Because many times, obviously, we're very siloed. So
yeah.
what would you suggest to get that collaboration going between the IT groups on campus?
Couple of things come to mind when I hear that. Um, Fortunate, unfortunate, or fortunate for you, leadership comes into play with that. I saw a graphic, I saw an infographic where somebody like me, when I go into the president's office or when I go into a cabinet meeting, I'm supposed to pose them questions and not data. right? Because I would be, you know, subject to kind of talk about, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Well, that is what you have to do. You have to challenge and pose those questions to the pain points and the choke points that you face and the people that are the gatekeepers of that. It's very unfortunate. The more that I do this, the more that I find the identity access management professional gets put in a corner. I never understood this. And when the identity access management professional is probably the cornerstone of all access. So I've never understood that. So education and bringing education to that. And then I'd say this, we're doing it now, right? We're talking. I'm looking at the screen. I'm overjoyed to see about 42 people on here, right? So we're doing this now. We're having a community together. And so that's where a lot of your consortias, a lot of your trade associations come into play because I don't know about you all. I just don't come up with ideas off the top of my head. I don't. You think I do probably, but I don't. Somebody has inspired me to think this way. Uh, I never went to the Army War College, but I heard an officer tell me that Damien, when you get to the War College, that is probably the only time that you really have to come up with your own stuff. They said outside of that, somebody has researched it, somebody has commented on it, somebody has said something about it. So at that point, it's time for you to make your opinion and stand on your observation. And so that's how I would attack, collaborative effort and identity access management and breaking down those silos. So,
Excellent. And so it sounds like kind of what you're saying is educating the different people in IT on some of the business needs. Like for the HPC, educating them on how the IAM team can help them get their help them help researchers get research done, and how being able to have smooth access into an HPCU could be something enabling. Going back to your person that you said that was logging in Saturday morning and was worried about losing their work. And it's like, if you can help them get in easily to get their work done, they can get so much more done.
Nick, I wanted to say one more thing about that. When we were in the teams, I said I have the fortune of, again, my leadership backing me, and the entire security team is tactically and operationally loaned to me, right, to do security. There's only two guys, me and my scientist slash specialist, and then the rest of them are loaned to me to do security. And among them are my three counterparts, the other three directors. And so one of the directors for academic IT, he shocked me. He was like, say something that was brilliant. We were in a call and we were trying to figure it out, and everybody was giving their input. And then the director of academic IT said, time out. He is like, we don't figure this out. The business tells us what we need to do and we make it work. And we advise at that point how to let it work and how it needs to flow. All right. So again, you got to let the business talk to you about what has to happen and we support it. And so that's how we do that.
Excellent. Thanks, Damien.
Yeah.
So Michael has another good question in the QA around the zero trust journey.
Hmm.
When you where the question that everyone is interested, because zero trust has been such a focus on some of the different requirements
Yeah.
around, where do you focus your energy first? Strategizing in architecture, investing in solutions, educating people and processes to start thinking more about zero trust. And so, like, where do you get started? And
Hmm.
part of the thing that he was suggesting is that there's the old people, processes, or technology question.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Again, I'm not somebody that likes to reinvent the wheel. And you know, that people, process, and technology, you may be shocked to where that really may not be as adopted as you think, right? I have to tell vendors all the time. I said, guys, I like your tech. I congratulate you for being in the marketplace. I said, but the moniker is people, process, and then technology. I said, I saw that the United States put a man on the moon. So I was saying the technology is always going to be there. How are my people and how through process is your solution easily implemented in my environment, not everybody else's, in my environment? So I do start with that. And then I also start with a good baseline. People, governance, risk, and compliance, and regulations, all of these standards, sometimes those can be daunting. But if you come up with a way that your organization goes through it and how you go through it, then that is another place to start. Uh, I'm just going to put it out there. In the oil and gas company, I worked in the environmental, health, safety, and security department. So, you know what that means? That means I took codes of federal regulation that Congress passed and translated them to what it means for business. And so there's some baselines and there's some starting points that you work from that are not the end all be all, but starting points for you to build your own network and your own strategy, right? And your own adoption. And so it's knowing that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is knowing your network. There's parallels. My network may be like your network, but it's still different and it's still unique to us. And so understanding your back end, understanding your network architecture and topology, understanding how access control and role-based access control plays a part are how you start. And you start there and the journey has got to be yours. I hate to be like I sometimes I wish that journey would speed up for me as well, but sometimes it doesn't speed up. You have to walk through it. It's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint to the end. And so those are some of the ways that you start.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like starting with people, which of course talks very heavily to the IAM, and in common, they've got some they create that platform for sharing some of those best practices, and
Mm,
and
mm.
we're all running a different marathon, but maybe we can share something to help us make that marathon a little bit easier, because
Yes,
working as a community, we can help each other, and we can
exactly.
help, because IT people, we're not really competing with each other. The researchers, the football teams, the recruiting students, they're
Yeah,
competing, but
yeah.
we're working together. Maybe we should compete on who can enable the business the best.
I
But
like
it's
that.
like it's like how do we come together as a community, and Common does some of that to help build the community around IAM and sharing of best practices. There are some baseline expectations around how to set some expectations across the community so that we can know that we can trust each other, and then use that as a jumping off point for your researchers to get access to some of the controlled data repositories, or having higher levels of assurance for identity. And
Mhm.
so some of those developing some of those practices, and we've worked with the community to develop those, and it's getting them out and sharing those practices is hard. It's going
Yeah.
because it's going out, it's talking here, it's talking at other regional meetings, it's talking.
Mm,
So you've one of the things you um, when we were preparing this, you talked about the fusion center that you've got, and it's like in Mississippi, like talk a little bit. Could you share us a little bit about how you
yeah.
share some of those practices within your region to help each other?
Oh man. So, um, I could probably talk about that all day long. Uh, so coming from, oil and gas and participating in trade associations and then looking at other universities that were successful in it. To name a few, Purdue University and Louisiana State University. So I was explaining that to my boss the first year that I worked here. And that was in January. And in October, one day I looked for him and I couldn't find him. And you have to know how we're set up. He was downstairs and he was building this something similar to a network operating center or a security operating center. And it's a fusion center in the States, the Department of Homeland Security. They have one in each state. And it's a place where everyone that wants a seat at the table has a seat at the table. You can be a vendor, you can be an individual, you can be a government entity, you can be a local police department. If there's information to be shared, that is where you can get it and you can get it freely. And if you ask me, Damien, well, what is this? I would tell you it's a information sharing and intelligence gathering and training place where you can come. I've Nick, I've had students come through there. I've had adult learners who wanted to change their career come and sit with me, and I just show them the tools that I have. I show them my stack, what I can show them, and I tell you, you would walk. I had all kind of people just walk away and understanding more. And not only that, but I have eighth and seventh graders and high schoolers come through there. I've had government agencies come through there, and they are just thoroughly, just blown away by the stuff that I'm willing to share, that my leadership allows me to share, and that they can walk away knowing something more, maybe about the same thing we saw, or maybe something they didn't see. And to highlight that, our local Federal Bureau of Investigations in the state, their headquarters in the state here in the state capitol, they like that thing so much they invited me to come sit with some of their, intelligence analysts and some of their new cyber guys, cyber analysts that are, coming into the FBI for the first time. And so, it's really remarkable. And so that's one of my superpowers. Information, I tell you, information is my superpower, and knowing what to do with it. That's just what I'm able to, fortunate to be able to do. So
That's that's cool. So uh, I'm wondering for many of our international attendees, like uh, do you have like the similar type of fusion centers, or how would you anybody have anybody trying to do this um, in their region and have a question that you want to ask, so how to replicate what Damien is doing in his state, so that you can bring that back to your campus or to your community, so that so you can replicate that. And so we'll give people a minute, particularly
yeah,
the
sure.
the translations, in case they've got some questions coming not in English. And so if you've got any questions, please put them in the QA, or type in the chat, and we'll get to them. And so we'll give you just a moment to ask your questions. Um, One of the things that we've talking about the identity and helping enable people to get things done is makes me think about new and emerging technologies.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you, because sometimes those new and emerging technologies can help really be cornerstones of digital transformation for your campus. And so within the Net Plus program,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about working together to vet these new technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are some of the things that you see where we can work on those new technologies together as a community to help each other?
Yeah. Well, I would say this. I know a big part of my job is to understand the emerging technologies. And I have to understand the emerging technologies because I have to understand the not necessarily new threats, because the threats are not new, but the patterns of the threats. And as the patterns of the threats emerge, how is the technology being able to adapt to the emerging and revolving threats that are there? And so, again, there's strength in numbers. And so, people that are building and people that are testing and people that have experience. And I'm you know, there's a lot of vendors that say they're agnostic, right? But I am truly agnostic. Now, what I inherited was a pure Cisco shop, so I'm fine with that. But I would also be fine if I inherited a Palo Alto shop or a Juniper shop, right? Or whatever, right? Because my job is to use it. Like as an officer in the military, my job was to complete the mission and complete the mission with what I have and what I've been assigned and what I've been allocated. And so when you have a community, right, that is able to pull information from different solutions and different strategies, and you're being able to share that kind of stuff, you would be able to move forward with understanding the advancements in technology. And maybe when you have your community, have some of those security sponsors and some of those security vendors come in to talk about their latest and greatest. Sometimes they're a good solution standalone. Sometimes they're a good solution in tandem with others. And so, again, what fits you? I like your marathon analogy, right? How do you prepare at 6 o'clock in the morning? Do you run in the track that day or do you run into the track later that day? What's your food intake like? Do you eat protein in the morning? Do you eat protein what do you do? Because there's different types of athletes. We know that. And then there's different types of athletes, but they all sometimes meet the same goal and the same championship, the same title, right? So that's how I would, frame that, and that's how I would keep up with digital transformation.
So I like that. IT professionals as athletes. So
Yeah,
we probably have time for one more question. So any
yeah.
final questions from the audience?
And while we're waiting on those questions, this is an example of, I call it my bat cave. I'm a comic book guy, and I like the character superhero Batman. So I feel like Bruce Wayne when I get in here with all this technology and everything else. So I call it my bat cave. In the middle, right here with the pinkish orange shirt, that's the cybersecurity specialist slash scientist, Summer A. Boyd, and she is a godsend to me. And she's a ethical hacker by trait. We pulled her from a research project, and she, on her research project, created her own form of ransomware. So I know that I've got the right person with me, and got the right person reading the network and analyzing the network. So, yeah,
Excellent. Thanks, Damien. I think so no more questions have come in. And so I think we're right at time. And so we should
sure.
probably, I'll hand it back to to Anne to close us out.
All right.
Wonderful. What a fascinating discussion. Thank you, everyone, for attending.